All right, welcome back to the home team. Now, why is sex such a taboo topic in marriages and families? Next, we have a pre-taped segment with popular intimacy educator Laura M. Brotherson, and she's the author of the groundbreaking book on sexual intimacy, And They Were Not Ashamed, Strengthening Marriage Through Sexual Fulfillment. Here's what she has to say. I'm here with Laura Brotherson, best-selling author and intimacy educator, and her book is And They Were Not Ashamed, Strengthening Marriage Through Sexual Fulfillment. It's a fabulous book. I highly recommend it. And welcome back.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So the topic for today is, why is sex such a taboo subject in so many marriages?
Yes, it's a very taboo subject in everywhere almost, but particularly in marriage. There's a lot of reasons that sex is a taboo subject. You know, we can go through a couple of them. You know, and sex is a real taboo subject in families and parenting as well, and we can talk about that. But, you know, you could just start with the fact that people are just embarrassed by the subject.
Why?
Well, I think for one thing, and this is why this particular show and these shows that you're doing on intimacy are so great, because people need to see people that they feel are trustworthy, that are talking confidently and comfortably about the subject of sex, because it almost gives permission for people to then talk about it. You know, where we so rarely see, I mean, I like to, in a lot of my classes, I like to have people raise their hands and say, okay, somebody, raise your hand if you remember the last time you heard something positive said about sex in some kind of public forum. Usually the only people that raise their hands are those that saw me speak at Education Week or something. And that's a problem, because people think, one of the other reasons is that a lot of people think sex is it's too personal. You can't talk about it, it's too personal. Well, I talk about sex all the time, and I never say anything that's personal or too personal. At least maybe I should check with my husband on that.
Yeah,
but
you may not be the best judge of that, right?
I think he would say I'm okay. Yeah. So people don't realize that there's a lot you can talk about and be very appropriate and be very respectful of that private, intimate relationship. So when people can see the other people talking about it, that really helps to open up the subject a little bit. I love this one lady. She was at some of our seminars, actually on our cruise, couples cruise, and she said she went home and all of a sudden she realized a lot more negative discussion about sex, and for the first time she really found herself stepping up to the plate and saying, this is a good thing, and we need to be more positive, and your kids are learning from what you're saying, and this is what it takes, is just enough people to kind of say, sex is a wholesome, good thing in marriage, and we can talk about this.
Yeah.
So,
and you don't have to self-disclose personal details in order to be okay talking about it.
You bet. There's so many people. I mean, you know, a lot of times friends can provide little helpful insights that don't reveal anything too personal, but that can be very valuable. You know, other reasons that people have a hard time that this is such a taboo subject is just fear. A lot of people have the fear that if you talk about it, kids will go out and do it. Well, studies show that it's the least informed, the least talked to children that are the ones that are going out and experimenting. So, you know, light on the subject is a good thing. Darkness is not. So we need to talk a little bit more about it. But, you know, with couples, with some couples, they don't want to talk about it because they think, well, talking about it, that indicates we have a problem. Well, you forget that I like to teach the concept that sexual incompatibility is inevitable in marriage. You've got a man and a woman with very different sexual wiring coming together. You're going to have some incompatibility, and you've got to be able to talk about that. So otherwise, you're going to have some problems.
Well, I think it's that way for a really good reason. Because it forces couples to grow and to develop the other part of them.
You bet.
And so I just, even though it's really difficult.
Yes. But you know, one of the easy ways to do it is like with reading a book. When you read a book together, you're bringing up topics that are not, that you don't have to come up with. It's just like all of a sudden you've got, you know, a lot of couples will write to me and they'll say, yeah, we're reading through a certain chapter and my husband said, is that true? Is that true for you? Is that how you feel? And the wife's like, is that true for you? Is that how you feel? And they're both like, yeah. And all of a sudden the lights are going on where it's like, oh, we finally get it. And we understand each other's sexual wiring, and then we can make things work a lot better.
Yeah.
So
that's wonderful. And there's a recent study that talks about couples rate, or people who are having sex more frequently rate themselves as happier.
Yeah, absolutely. And healthier and less likely to get sick, and I could go on.
Yeah, and so I'm not sure if it's happy people want more intimacy, or intimacy makes it, or it's probably I think it's a circular thing as well.
Yes, it's probably some of both.
So it's a really important part of relationships that is sometimes difficult to talk about.
Absolutely.
So what are some other reasons that it's kind of taboo?
Such a taboo subject. Boy, there's a lot of times couples have a lot of questions about the what's okay and what isn't stuff, because people.
What do you mean what's okay?
So, you know, a husband and wife come together, they both have very different preferences, interests in the sexual, in lovemaking, and so they have a lot of hard time negotiating those differences.
What's comfortable,
what's uncomfortable, what feels appropriate for me, what feels inappropriate. So there's a lot of the questions that we get, and so when you don't really know, and if the discussion gets into the right and wrong between a husband and wife, that gets really hard. Whereas
like a moral issue versus a preference.
Right. Whereas a lot of times what I have found is that once people are able to work through their inhibitions, I have found that a lot more of it has to do with just preferences, that if you can think of it in terms of they just see it differently than I do, it's not right and wrong all the time, that can help people to negotiate those things a little bit better. You know, a lot of times, you know, there's a lot of other reasons. Sometimes just bringing up the subject, if you would like something to change in the relationship, you don't want to hurt your spouse's feelings, and so you're like, well, I don't want to tell them, or I don't want to ask for this. That's another one. We don't talk about it because we don't want to feel selfish if we're asking for something.
You know, in my clinical practice, what I found is a lot of women don't even know what they want. They're so disconnected from passion in general. And I think that's a huge problem. So, you know, this taboo part of talking about sex impacts how we teach our kids, and we're gonna talk about that next.
You bet.
Okay. We'll be right back with the home team, You and Me Monday.